Ohio State has the right pieces to win the national championship in 2024.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to a feel-good Friday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Here on Friday, August 9th in the year 2024. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. During today's show, PFF data analyst and the co-host of the PFF College Football Show, Dalton Wasserman, is here with us today. Him and I will dive into expectations at Ohio State, who he thinks should win the Buckeyes quarterback battle, and what Buckeye fans can expect to see and witness when Caleb Downs is wearing the scarlet and gray. Trust me, the season's right around the corner. The boys are ramping up for the season, and I can't wait to hear what Dalton has to say about what the Buckeyes will be in 2024. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes is one of the individuals at PFF that does a phenomenal job of covering college football. He is Dalton Wasserman. He is a PFF data analyst and the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Dalton, welcome to Locked On Buckeyes a few weeks before the start of the 2024 season.
Jay, I appreciate you. It's coming up on us quick, isn't it? We got the season rolling, so much anticipation, and I just can't wait for a 12-team playoff and all of the anticipation that comes with it. I'm ready for a time late in the year when instead of 6 or 7 teams being relevant, it's going to be closer to something like 25 or 30. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun at the top. But I think especially when we get to November, it's going to be the most fun time of the year.
November is for those contenders, and we're going to be looking to see who is actually going to be able to contend for a national championship this year with the expanded playoff. That may come up later in the show, but Dalton and I are going to do something that I really haven't done much lately, Dalton. We've done a lot of preseason and fall camp conversations and recruiting stuff throughout the summer. We haven't really talked about season expectations for Ohio State, so I won't even give mine first. I'm curious to hear what you think the Buckeyes will do in 2024.
Honestly, I think they should have national championship expectations. They have surprisingly a lot of talent that could have left for the draft that came back, especially on defense, right? I think they have a top 3 defense in the country. When you talk about guys like Jack Sawyer and Denzel Burke and JT Tuimoloau, they just have so much talent. And then you add Caleb Downs in the transfer portal. I think they have a top 3 defense in the country. And then you probably have the best pair of running backs in the country on offense and a new offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly who loves to run the ball. He's going to give the ball to Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. It's going to feel like every play sometimes. Yeah. And honestly, I would too with those two guys as talented as they are. But I think they have enough talent as long as they figure out this quarterback situation. You know, Max and I on our show have been talking about, we think Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon are the 3 teams really on the inner circle for national title contention. I think Ohio State should expect everything this year.
You know, that game against Oregon that Ohio State's playing in the regular season, people were thinking, and some were saying, oh, the first Big Ten championship game where it's 1 versus 2 in the conference, it could easily be Ohio State and Michigan, a rematch in back-to-back weeks. I honestly think it could be a rematch of the October 12th matchup between Ohio State and Oregon, and that's not a knock on Michigan. I think I'm leaning towards being higher on Michigan this year than I was a month ago or even a week ago, just because I'm coming to grips with, well, if Sherrone Moore does not get suspended for everything going on right now, I do think that team is going to be solid on both sides of the ball. More questions on offense, but that defense will keep them in a lot of games this year. That Oregon team, though, those pesky Oregon Ducks, Dan Atlantic has done a phenomenal job of building that team up and creating that team to be what I think will be a force in the Big Ten. Ultimately, though, I think Ohio State's defense, just like I think Michigan's defense will be really good, I think Ohio State's defense will be better than Michigan's this year, and I think they're going to have to show up and go crazy in Autzen Stadium to win that game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you because, honestly, Oregon might have the best offense in the country, and if you're going to lose Bo Nix in the NFL draft, there's not a better guy you could get to replace him than Dylan Gabriel. So they're set at quarterback. They can always run the ball. They've got a great receiver pair in Tej Johnson and Evan Stewart. They got two good tight ends. They are just loaded offensively, maybe the best offense in the country. So you're going to get a really good matchup on that side of the ball. And then really the question for Oregon is their defense, right? And the only thing that could stop them the last 2 years was Michael Penix Jr., right? So their defense is pretty good. Dan Lanning's a good defensive mind, but it may come down to the other side of the ball in that game of how can they stop Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson? What can Will Howard do to show up in the big moments?
Let's stick with those running backs really quickly. We'll get to the defense here in a second, but a lot of people and myself, I quickly bought into the 1-2 punch, the dynamic duo, which it should be. I mean, it'd be kind of silly to not dive into that and be all in on those two guys. Lately, I said I think Quinshon Judkins should start for Ohio State. Henderson should be the backup. Maybe put Henderson more in the slot a little bit. The issue with that is you got so many good receivers that it's kind of hard to maybe take one guy off to put Henderson out there. But Henderson's such a threat out there with the ball in space. It might make sense even at that point to say, hey, let's try it out a little bit. Let's add this little wrinkle in. Keep both running backs on the field, but split out one in the slot. I think Judkins, though, at the end of the year, will have more rushing yards than Henderson, more rushing touchdowns than Henderson. And I think he'll be more of the guy that gets more of the tougher yards for the Buckeyes this year. What do you think about that?
I think they're two different types of runners, and that's always good to have, right? Judkins is kind of that all-around flashy runner that breaks tackles, and he's great with his feet, and he just has excellent vision. And Henderson, look, I think Henderson brings a really physical presence too, right? And I think he's more of a classic one-cut zone runner, and I think Chip Kelly's going to love him. Even when he needs a 3rd and 3, he's got a two-way go with either of those guys, right? And you make a great point about having both those guys on the field, because to me, when if I'm a team with two great running backs, my favorite thing to see, I remember like the Saints with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara used to do it all the time. Just put them both out there. Talent is talent, no matter what position they are on the depth chart, right? So I'm with you on either of those guys, especially Henderson playing in the slot. But I think the fact that they're two different runners helps a lot. And I think Chip Kelly has now the flexibility to use them in two different situations, right? We've seen him in the past at Oregon, right, where it's like he's got one great back, say a LaMichael James, and that's the guy that's getting 1,700 yards. One thing that happened with Judkins last year at Ole Miss is that he might have been a little overworked, and late in the season, the last 4 or 5 games started to slow down. So I think the presence of Henderson only helps Judkins, even if that means, say, neither one of them is going for 2,000 yards or winning a Heisman Trophy or something like that.
What do the numbers at PFF say about those two backs?
Well, I'll start with Judkins, as the numbers are off the charts. Over the last 2 years, he leads the Power 5 in rush yards, yards after contact, forced missed tackles, and I believe he's second behind Blake Corum in touchdowns. Judkins has just been incredibly productive in 2 years at Ole Miss, just basically unstoppable. Even last year, a down year for him was 1,100-something yards and like 12 touchdowns. So, I mean, we're calling that a down year. He's probably still one of the 10 best backs in the country. And Henderson missed a few games last season, but in what he showed us, he was just really, really good. And again, I think it's just hard-nosed, one-cut zone running that he's going to make the NFL with in certain systems. And I really admire what he did in the Notre Dame game. I mean, when Ohio State was really struggling in the passing game until that last drive, Henderson brought that physical presence against an elite defense like Notre Dame that really made the difference of keeping him in that game till the very end. So we love both of those guys. I believe our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, has them both in the top. I believe it's in the top 50. Yeah, both are in the top 50 of his big board right now. So that shows you how good those two guys are.
I want to touch on that in a second because I heard someone on a different show maybe go a little bit different outside of that, but I'm going to dive into those backs and them being top 50 in the draft coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games. And the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This episode is brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more. And the best service in Central Ohio. Everything you need for in-home and even backyard entertainment is at Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus carries the best pool tables from Brunswick, Austin, Canada, billiards, and more. In their grills, whether you like charcoal or gas or wood-fired, Billiards Plus has the perfect setup for all grillers. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will always go above and beyond to give you the best customer service in the industry. Billiards Plus, visit their showroom or Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. Thank you for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football Podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignment, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So those two guys being top 50 on the big board, I think that's huge because I think there are some people, there's conversations, Henderson might be higher on some boards and then Judkins is lower. I've never really thought, even me personally right now, viewing them both as top 50 guys based off what they've done so far. I think at the end of the year, they might both be top 50 guys. It's just, I think Judkins will go crazy this year when the ball's in his hands. But for them to be top 50 guys on the big board right now on Sycamores board, I think that says a lot about how he views them and what they can do together this year.
Absolutely. I mean, what they could do together, again, could spur the offense all the way towards a national title run, right? Chip Kelly loves to run the ball, and he loves to dig into his play-action game off of it, and that's really where Will Howard will excel too. So that's exactly how I expect the playbook to look, is exactly how Chip Kelly's run it for as long as we've seen him coaching football, right? So these two guys know they're the driving force. There are going to be weeks where you may see Will Howard throw the ball less than 20 times, honestly, because – there's coaches that believe, and Kelly has been one of them in the past. Look, if they can't stop it, don't stop using it, right? Mm-hmm. And these two guys, when you have two guys this freakishly talented behind an offensive line with multiple NFL prospects on it as well, you just keep going. I'm curious to see if they ramp up the pace now. Chip Kelly's so used to running the no huddle and trying to run 90 or 100 plays in a game. What does that look like with these two guys? That may be where it's more valuable than anything to have both of them and switching them in and out as subs, because they're trying to run as many plays as possible if Chip Kelly's doing it the way he's always been doing it. And once you start wearing down defenses and running these two guys at them, you're going to start putting up some crazy numbers on the ground.
So you said Will Howard's name a couple of times, and just in the regular conversation have already said and slated him as a starting quarterback. Ryan Day has not publicly announced that. And I always say publicly because it wouldn't shock me if in-house they already have a guy named, but he hasn't said it publicly just because he wants to wait his time to make that statement public. I think he should be the starting quarterback. I think it would be very silly to not start him week one. Why are you so comfortable saying Will Howard will start for Ohio State this year?
It just there's a couple of things. I mean, when you're talking about guys in the transfer portal, they're looking for playing time, right?
Correct.
And it's always that thing of I don't think Howard would have gone there if he didn't feel like he was the starter. And honestly, for this team with these expectations, I think at least at first, I think you want a veteran guy in there, right? This is a guy who people forget 2 years ago beat that TCU team that was a national runner-up for the Big 12 title, right? And he played his heart out in that game, and Kansas State won a Big 12 title over an eventual national runner-up. He's a leader. Now, does he have his flaws? Absolutely. There's things to fix, and Chip Kelly's got to work to his strengths. But I think to have a veteran leader like that on a team like this with these expectations, this is not a young team. This is a team that's expecting to win a trophy. And I think I remember Clemson doing the same thing. You remember with Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence, where Kelly Bryant started the season because they felt like they needed that veteran presence. And then when it wasn't going great, then Lawrence came in there. So you could see that eventually, but I think from the outset, Will Howard has to start.
So you're saying stuff that that I had on the show on. This is going to be on Friday. So this is something that's been talked about numerous times, and even on a Thursday show here on Locked On Buckeyes, talking about, well, Will Howard starting early. Maybe at some point throughout the season, he is not the starter. The thing in Clemson, they put in Trevor Lawrence as a true freshman. Now, are you saying that if Howard goes out, Sayin is the guy to start for Ohio State as a true freshman this year?
I would think it's very possible. I know Devin Brown has some experience, but it kind of was tough for him in the bowl game against Missouri, and I believe he got hurt in that game, didn't he?
Did.
So I mean, saying just with so much talent, and they swiped him from Alabama late in the recruiting process, or he transferred after Saban left. I forget how that went. I mean, if you have a guy with that much talent, you have to at least think about it, right? Nowadays in college football, between NIL and portal and everything else that goes on, if a guy has talent and he wants to play, you have to see if he can play. Right now, if Will Howard's excelling early in the year and he leads you to a win in Eugene over Oregon and all that, well, he's got to stay for as long as he's excelling. But it's always going to be in the back of everybody's mind that the quarterback is the one big question here. And I do think it would be Julian Sand. I think they would take that chance as long as they're comfortable with what they've seen in practice. Obviously, we haven't seen a ton of them and not on a live field at all. So I also wonder if maybe we've seen it before, where you get those late game reps and those mop-up games, early in the year too, just to get his feet wet, right? And I think that's really the big difference. Is Sand probably more talented than Howard? Sure, but Howard's got the experience and leadership, and you're going to need that to get through some big games.
The leadership is going to be key, and that's one thing that Ohio State's defense has in a way that most schools do not. We think about guys that could go to the NFL. They decide to stay in school. Yeah, you may get one guy to come back. You may get two guys to come back. I think basically everybody that could have gone, except for Michael Hall Jr., everybody stayed. So you have leaders on the defensive line. They're all going to be gone too. That's the weird thing. Like, I think Tyleik Williams may have one more year, but he's gone after this year. I don't think he's going to stay. But that leadership on defense, you talk about Howard's leadership, that leadership on defense, especially when we focus on that game in Eugene, is going to be huge for the Buckeyes to, one, knock off the Ducks, but also to accomplish everything they want to accomplish this year.
Yeah, I agree. And I look up front at that defensive line first and foremost. And I know they lost Hall, but they kept some absolute beasts. And honestly, my favorite one is Jack Sawyer. I think the way he plays just exemplifies everything you could want in a defensive end, a D lineman, any defensive player, really a football player, man.
Yeah.
To me, it starts with his run defense. He's one of the elite run defenders in the country. I think he's as fundamentally sound in run defense as any player at any position in the country. If I was still coaching, I would show his run D tape at a clinic. I'm telling you. And then he's only getting better as a pass rusher. And I think the other two guys, obviously, Tuimoloau and Tyleik Williams, they're big moments guys. Their highs are as high as anybody. We just need a little more consistency out of them. But you can see it when Tuimoloau is bull rushing through first-round picks like Olu Fashanu from Penn State the last 2 years, or Tyleik Williams making huge plays in the run game. This has the potential to be the best defensive line in the country. It's certainly in the top 3 or 4. It could be number 1 by the end of the year. But for me, that's where it starts. And then moving to the back end, there's a lot of talent back there too. But this D-line, when you're talking about playing elite offensive lines like Oregon, or playing in physical games like games against Michigan and Penn State, that to me is what drives the whole thing on their defense.
What do the numbers say about Tuimoloau and Sawyer, kind of that duo together?
So it's an elite duo for sure. To have both those guys is a privilege, right?
Yeah.
Sawyer's as well-rounded as any player in the country. For us, he was the only edge player last year with at least an 85 grade in run D and pass rush. He's arguably the most well-rounded defensive end in college football right now. Tuimoloau, the numbers lack a bit of consistency, right? Like he will go, you can see it. He will go through stretches of games where he's the best player on the field, no question. Mm-hmm. And then he'll go through stretches of games where you're kind of like, okay, where is he? Like, so Sawyer's more consistent and well-rounded. Tuimoloau probably has a higher ceiling when you look at how athletic he is at his size. And there's moments. You turn on JT's highlight tape, and it's as good as anybody. Just needed a little bit more often.
That's one thing that I was very excited about when he decided to play at Ohio State. I watched his film from high school, and I said, oh, this guy's athletic. I did not even think, oh, this athleticism might not translate like it is in high school to college. I think he's still athletic. I just wonder, why is he not using it as much as maybe he should? Now, I don't know what he's being told to do by Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles, so maybe what he's being told to do is not tap into the athleticism at 100%. I'm not sure. It would be kind of silly to me, but I don't know. One thing I do know is you mentioned, talk about Sawyer, talk about Tuimoloau. Those are two really good guys. Tyleik Williams, to me, can be one of the top first 3 defensive tackles drafted next year. And I haven't looked at the numbers at PFF to see exactly how they grade him. I know you're looking for more consistency, But even with the lack of consistency there, how does he stack up with the numbers to everybody else?
He's one of the most valuable run defenders in the country, and this times you can see it on his tape. I believe he's a top 5 most valuable run defender in the country over the last 2 years among defensive tackles. That's where it starts right there. You know, you talked about Michael Hall before. Michael Hall gave you the pass rush, but Tyler Williams is a brick wall in the middle, man. And even at his size, last year, I believe, playing at about 330 pounds, he can move different for a guy at that size, especially you talk about big guys like that. A lot of times have trouble getting lateral. He has no issue getting lateral, man. He can dip his shoulders. He can get across on zone runs, and he can cross guards' faces and get to the football. I mean, he's another one, just a freaky level athlete, especially in the run game, just a nose for the football, a really good get off and vision of where he needs to go. And I think just sometimes has to handle double teams and stuff a little bit better. But man, oh man, you see the high end in the run game, kind of like Tuimoloau in the pass rush. You see the high end in Tyleik Williams' run game, and you're like, man, that's an NFL guy. That's something close to a first round pick, and he can push the pocket too. Let's be real, but I think to me the run D sticks out as one of the best players in the country in that facet.
There are a few things we have not talked about with Dalton yet. One's on offense, one's on defense. We'll dive into it next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. We all love things that make our lives easier. Gametime does that. We all occasionally make last-minute decisions just to enjoy our free time. And Gametime allows us to do that while watching Major League Baseball with the flash deals, their zone deals, and their all-in pricing. It makes purchasing last-minute Major League Baseball tickets really easy, and it even takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Sonny Styles is getting a lot of attention right now. He's moving from a safety spot to linebacker. Everything we're hearing from fall camp is that he's acclimating very well to that linebacker spot. Of course, things will be maybe a little bit different once Big Ten play starts, once games start being played, even in non-conference, the speed of the game, when the opposition is trying to scheme you and trying to make you look foolish, that may happen on the field. But what did the numbers say about him last year as a starter at the safety spot?
In run defense, fantastic. And I'm glad you brought this up because it was something I was just looking at earlier. Yeah. An 84 run defense grade last year at safety was the 8th best in the Power 5. He is about it. I mean, let's just say it, like guys who want the smoke in the run game, Sonny Styles is one of those guys, right? And it's a huge role he's going to be playing after losing Steel Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg, right? Both to the NFL. Him and Cody Simon to me at linebacker are two guys those are the guys I'm watching on their defense to go, okay, these are kind of the new guys stepping into the full-time roles. But no, Styles is every bit in on the action. You watch him tackle. And I think the two things, you see several teams across the country every year where they try to move safeties up to linebacker, give me that athletic linebacker thing. Well, Sonny's 6'4" and 235. Like this is not, right. He already looks like a linebacker. And the other part of it is just, you go, okay, is the effort, is the willingness there to really, to get dirty in the trenches like that and take on guards and hit 220-pound backs. But you see every bit of it, honestly. I mean, and you're talking about even last year making plays against physical teams, right? The Big Ten's arguably the most physical conference in the country. You go, obviously, Penn State and Michigan in those teams, but even playing a team like Rutgers, right, where he was fantastic in that game, and they're as physical as anybody in the Big Ten, at least, you know, with their run game and their offensive line and Kyle Monunga. He's not afraid to tackle. He's not afraid to take on blocks. I think it's a great idea. With Caleb Downs coming in at safety behind him, now you move Styles up to a role where maybe it is out of necessity, sure, and he still could play safety, but I love the idea of moving him up.
Oh, man, I love it, too. It's one thing last year. Some of my buddies, we've been talking about it, and it's like it might be better for him to be closer to the line of scrimmage, but I also realized last year you're not going to put him at linebacker and take out Eichenberg or even Cody Simon or Steel Chambers. You're not going to take one of those three guys out to put him there. But I'm glad he's there now. I think it's actually a better fit for him at the next level is to play linebacker. Let's go back to offense. Let's let's stay on defense. I'll go to offense back in a second. Caleb Downs, you just mentioned him, and Ohio State fans are going to get quickly acquainted with how talented this young man is. Even in the non-conference, he's going to make some numerous plays and roam the field and be like, wow, that's what the SEC Freshman of the Year did last year. Yeah, that's the kind of guy he is. Was he, based off the PFF grades, the best safety in college football last year?
So for the entire season, he was like 8th or 9th, but
okay.
If you take out the first 3 games, basically he had 3 games where he looked like a true freshman.
Yeah.
And then after week 3, he was number 1 in our rating, which is nuts when you consider true freshman in the SEC. Nick Saban trusts him enough that he led Alabama in snaps played. I mean, Saban almost never trusts freshmen like that. And for him to trust Caleb Downs basically with the keys to his defense when the front 7 at times in the middle had issues, but their secondary was still arguably the best secondary in college football last year. Caleb Downs was really the key to it. And what he did as a true freshman makes no sense. And look, it's actually the 7th best grade that he got that we've ever given to a true freshman safety in 10 years of doing this. He's not just really good. He's up there with Derwin James and Javon Holland and Kyle Hamilton and the elite guys that have come out at safety over the past decade. And this is as a true freshman. His instincts are way beyond his years. His ball skills are off the charts. I think the only thing maybe is he's probably not one of those guys where you put him in like a man-to-man situation like that, but that's why he plays safety. It's why he doesn't play corner, right? So that's really kind of, you're always looking for those matchups as an offense. But no, he's as well-rounded as it gets. And I'm just so impressed by his instincts so early in his career. I think the fit for him for the Buckeyes should be seamless because safety is probably the one spot last year where they were still good, right? You've got Lathan Ransom and Josh Proctor's a good player that I really liked last year, but they were good, but they weren't great like they were on the D-line. Or, you know, you have 2 NFL prospects at linebacker, Denzel Burke at corner. Now you have Caleb Downs in there. That alone makes you an elite unit at safety for sure. You're going to love him. That's all I can say because you watch his tape from Alabama and you just absolutely love the way he plays the game.
From one guy who did big things in the SEC as a true freshman to a guy who many people think will be a big piece of the pie, a true freshman wide receiver in Jeremiah Smith. I heard one person say that by the end of the year, Jeremiah Smith will be one of the best receivers in the country. Not Big Ten, but in the country. I have a hard time going that far. There's been a lot of conversations, a lot of bold predictions. I have a hard time making that kind of statement without the film. Now, people that are saying this know him personally from high school, so maybe they're a little biased, maybe they're not. But I have a hard time saying that. Also, I understand that him with Emeka Egbuka's a guy you guys were able to grade. You weren't able to grade Jeremiah Smith. So I'll get Smith's conversations in a second. But what did you see? What did the numbers say about Egbuka? And I was kind of surprised when he decided to stay in school because I figured you go off to the NFL and make your millions.
No, I mean, honestly, what it is just you coming off a down year with Egbuka in 2023, right? He dealt with injuries all season and he battled through them. The quarterback situation, look, I'm a fan of Kyle McCord. I thought he did a really, really good job. I think he catches way too much flack, and I hope he does a nice job at Syracuse. But it obviously is a step down from CJ Stroud. So there was a lot of outside factors that affected Egbuka last year. But look, 2022, he was an elite receiver. A lot of people going into last year had him as wide receiver 1 for the 24, or at least wide receiver 2 for the 24 draft, I should say, behind Harrison before Malik Neighbors emerged and Rome Odunze became one of those guys. But no, I think Egbuka, I like the idea of him coming back because I don't think you want to come out off of a down year like that where in a loaded wide receiver class, pretty likely would have been a second-round pick, honestly, with the year that he just had. Now, if he's healthy, he's one of the best threats in the country, especially to me in the intermediate game. And you bring up Smith, and I think, we don't have data on Smith, but from the videos and short practice clips that we've seen, this guy looks like a vertical threat, doesn't he? And I think to bring that element now with Marvin Harrison gone, and they didn't get too much working down the field here and there with McCord, but I think, Chip Kelly wants to get vertical with the play action stuff. If Smith is that guy, because it sure looks like the hands and the body control especially are off the charts, I think he's a great compliment to Egbuka, but Egbuka really still being that number 1 guy as the veteran of the group, as just getting healthy and running routes like he did in 2022. You could just tell there was a difference. I think he had leg injuries that was bothering him all last year. You can see the difference. It shows up in the numbers. It shows up on the film. If he gets back to being that guy, then your passing game is really, really dangerous too.
Oh, gosh. Oh, so much fun to watch. Dalton, what are your last thoughts about Ohio State this year? I know you said it's national championship contention this year. One, do you think they'll win the conference? Two, do you think they'll make the Final Four? Do you think they'll win the national championship? I hate the grouping questions like that together, but we're almost up out of time.
So I do have them winning the Big Ten. I will tell
Okay.
you that much. It is entirely possible, like you mentioned, this scenario where they could lose to Oregon at Eugene, but still make the Big Ten title game and kind of get revenge. So they don't necessarily have to go undefeated, right? They could. They very well could. They may be good enough to do that, but they don't necessarily have to. I think one loss would still get them, probably two losses even, honestly, would still get them into the playoff in some capacity. But I have them winning the Big Ten. I actually have them. I'm debating if they're going to win it or not, but I have them in the national title game.
Okay.
I think they're that talented. The quarterback obviously is a big question. They have more quarterback questions than a lot of the teams at the top. When you talk about Carson Beck at Georgia and Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, a Jackson Dart at Ole Miss is locked in, and there's a lot of teams toward the top that are more solidified. But I think Will Howard. I think it's just going to come down to the moments where, if we're down by 4 with 90 seconds left, and I need that one drive, because he showed it a little bit at Kansas State, but he was much more comfortable when the system and the play action and all that was working with him. So it's going to be a moments thing, right? I think there's no question to me Ohio State's winning at least 10 games. Zero question they're going to be in the top 12 at the end of the year. Probably going to see some heads roll if they're not, if we're being honest. But no, I think they're going to win the Big 12, and I think they very well could be in the national title game.
Who do you think they might play in that game?
I'm leaning towards Georgia. I think this is Georgia. I think for the rest of the SEC, and it's a loaded SEC at the top, man. There's 5 or 6 teams that are going to be in playoff contention, but I think there's a Georgia revenge tour coming. Carson Beck is really, really good. You had a really young defense last year that wasn't quite up to the standard of the few years before, but Kirby Smart's going to have them right. I think Georgia, even with a pretty tough schedule where they play Bama and Ole Miss and some of these other teams, I think Georgia's I think they're the most likely team in the country to go undefeated, and I think they're going a long, long way.
Dalton Wasserman from PFF, I thank you for coming on the show. If you could, let everyone know what you guys are doing at PFF to kind of spice up the season, and then kind of the coverage you guys will provide as well.
So we just, on the PFF College Football Show, we just finished our preview of all 70 Power 5 teams. We did an individual video, a team preview for every single one. So no matter who your team is, whether it's Ohio State or other teams in the Big Ten or anything around the country, we did all 70 Power 5 teams. Sometime soon here, I have a ranking of all 70 Power 5 quarterbacks coming out in written form on our website, and we're going to have game previews coming during the season. We're working on possibly putting together a review show for Sundays that I think we're still hammering out the details of, but we're figuring out how to do that. But we're going to have some fun all season long. We've got our awards predictions coming out, I believe, next week or the week after. So a lot of fun coming up this season, and the game previews, honestly, are the best part, man. We have so much information, Max Chadwick and I, that we can just break down every aspect of the biggest games of the week. So tune in for that. Subscribe.
Guys, you can follow Dalton on X at PFF_Dalton. You can follow me on the same platform at JSteven07. We're up out of here on a Friday, Buckeye fans. We'll see you next time.